we can make all these things better because obviously Blizzard's not wanting to. The biggest problem with the Blizzard interface is that it's actually kind of terrible.
Hello, my friend. Stay a while and listen.
If you're in the realm of World of Warcraft, or even if you've used like a World of Warcraft add-on, I'm known as the guy that's behind basically every add-on that's ever included the name Bob. So I guess you could just call me Bob. That has nothing to do with the warrior's name being Bob. I started playing World of Warcraft probably right at the tail end of Burning Crusade, and I didn't hit any form of a level cap until we were well into the Lich King, and it was a human warrior that I played. It looked exactly like this guy. I took time to pick out the model and everything, and the reason why you see him now is because I want to finally kill Syndragosa so I can at least face the Lich King, and hopefully I'll get there one of these days, but we'll find out. But I'm an old school add-on author. Basically, there's always been like this appeal to, making the interface of the game better. Because if you log into WoW Classic, you'll see that basically the interface in general is actually very uninformative and actually just kind of sucks. Even with like the default presentation of where the unit frames are up in the upper left corner, your mapping in the upper right, party frames by default is spawning on the left side, and then you got the massive action bars on the bottom there. And I am by no means a professional, but when it comes around to the phrase of user experience, I want to make like my personal experience as good as possible. And as a result, I wanted to make other people's experience as good as possible. While at the time that I started playing, add-ons were already well established into the game, and people just loved them. At the point where add-ons have become so prevalent in the game that the developers of the game, Blizzard, literally built the game with the intention that you're running some add-ons, which if you're a classic player, you'll find out what I'm talking about here in the next patch. But my biggest project by name would probably be the user interface project that I started, which was Bob UI. However, the most impactful thing that I have ever made was a much smaller add-on. I think it only has like 6 or 7 lines of code. It's called Raid Frame Resizer. And all it does is it just modifies a default frame slider where you got some frames where it's just like you can make them bigger or smaller, and it just dramatically increases that size. Well, that little add-on is involved in, at one point it was involved in several other projects, including Tuck UI, which was eventually forked into Elv UI, which at this point, if you're not running weak orders, you're probably running Elv UI, because they've just kind of just been synonymous with the game. I've also been the guy that got banned from the Ace Library project, which if you're using a World of Warcraft add-on, you're probably using the Ace add-on at some point in your life. So, because, I got in kind of a bit of a fight with some of the developers behind them, and while they're great people, and I agree that the work that they've done is fantastic, I'm also a bit of a Lua developer, which the add-ons are written in a programming language called Lua, and they wrote some really shitty code, and I'm just that guy on the internet that's gotta fix it. Problem is, when you're telling somebody that does something for free to fix their bad code, they don't necessarily like it sometimes. So obviously we're in Redridge, at the bridge that will never be completed. Even 10 years ago, when Cataclysm launched, this bridge was still never completed. And I think canonically the timeline is like 2 years since like vanilla into Cataclysm, which that's a lot of stuff to do in 2 years, but whatever. Anyways, the main reason why I chose this zone is I don't necessarily have a favorite zone. There are some zones that I love, but you ask me like what my favorite zone is, it's just like I don't know, because normally I just pick like I just have like a favorite zone in each expansion, and that's like my favorite zone. But I figured the big thing about Redridge is I wanted to pick like a place that like symbolizes not being finished. Because realistically, when you have a passion project, you're never done with it. You're never really done with it. Like if you're a woodworker and you make a chair, you look at that chair again, you're just going to see every single flaw you ever put into it, even though everybody tells you it's absolutely beautiful. And that's the same thing with software as well. But if you open up your World of Warcraft folder if you're on Windows, it's in your C drive in the programs x86 folder. If you go in there and go into your interface folder into the add-ons, that's basically where I've spent. At one point, it was 90% of my game time was spent in that folder just messing around with the text files in there. And honestly, I can't tell you how many hours I've spent getting a single frame to match up with a single pixel, which horizontally across your screen is on average 1920 at your 1920 by 1080p resolution, which by the way is not pixel perfect. That was a whole mess that I had to learn there, was some math and UI scaling and all that. Anymore, I just kind of quit caring about it. But there's a real attention to detail, especially in the Lua programming language, where you can spend hours troubleshooting an issue and then find out that ultimately it's because you left a comma somewhere you shouldn't have. And it's always a comma in the Lua programming language. It's never anything else. It's always a comma. But the biggest thing with Redridge is that if you've ever looked at the storyline, these are people that have lived here for some amount of time, and they're just trying to defend their home. If you're an Alliance player and you're leveling through Redridge in Classic, the mayor here, he's going to be sending you everywhere, trying to get him some assistance because the orcs are coming from the north and attacking. If we go up to Path up there, there's orcs that will actually sit there and attack you. It's actually one of the first zones that you go into where there are no yellow mobs. Everything just comes out and attacks you. I'm sure you probably found that out on your way over here. I started playing at the tail end of the Burning Crusade. It was my brother went to college and then came home one day and just like, I want to show you this cool game that apparently everybody's been playing that nobody's ever heard of, because I grew up in a very rural area. And he introduced me to World of Warcraft, and we shared the same account. And I found out really quickly that you could actually play World of Warcraft on dial-up, which I found pretty interesting. You could actually go in and you could do a 5-man dungeon as long as you were the tank, because you could control how big the pack sizes were. That way you could control how much lag you actually had, which that's where I picked up tanking. And that was actually a very unique experience. And it was actually, I can't remember the add-on's name, but there was an add-on that was popular back then that I really enjoyed, where whenever you got a critical hit, it would shout boom headshot. Which that was actually like one of the very first add-ons I ever used, and it's just one of those hilarious add-ons that you just never really used before, and then you would sit there using it. You're leveling a character, so you really don't have a huge crit chance. And every now and then you would just hear that, and then you would make your first death knight, and there was another add-on that so that every time you used your death grip, it would shout "Get over here," just like in the old Mortal Kombat sound. Which, that was always fun. So I've always had fun with like the weird and unusual add-ons. The reason why I wanted to eventually get around to creating add-ons was because I actually used a unit frame add-on called OUF. Whereas OUF is actually not necessarily an actual add-on that does anything by itself. It's a library. Basically, it provides a set of instructions and does basically all of the work for you. And that way you don't have to write a whole bunch of worthless code that everybody else in the world that's ever made a unit frame has to write. And there was an OUF layout that I used at the time that didn't get updated for Wrath of the Lich King. So when I found out that broke, I had to go out and I was figuring out how to get stuff like Pitbull working, which I think it was Pitbull 3 at the time, where you actually had to manually script out where the text prompts and all that, which that was what really got me interested in just like the actual language structure of macros in the game. And after just messing around with macros, just like, I want to learn how people are writing these scripts. And that's where I ran into that prompt one day of where you could actually open up like a command console and actually export the UI data. That way you could actually look at all the API calls that your user interface uses. And it was actually a real neat adventure, just sitting there figuring out how to write an add-on, which basically an add-on is really just a bunch of flat frames stacked on top of each other when you really look at it. Because basically, in order to make an add-on, you create a frame, and it's inside that frame where you put stuff. Any add-on that's like a modification of another thing is really just hooking to this frame that thing is on and just adding to it. So everything's basically just on top of a box, which I thought was actually pretty cool. It's like I didn't know it was that simple. But it was roughly when I actually got proper access to high-speed internet is when I really started getting into the add-ons. Because that's when I really started getting into the actual progression rating scene. Of which, like I said, I never killed the Lich King, so of course the guild and groups that I ran with all just sucked. Because I played right up until the end of Wrath of the Lich King, well into Cataclysm. So, but it wasn't until Cataclysm that more front-facing stuff that you guys would use actually started to become popular. There was a project that I contributed quite heavily to, the Power Auras reboot, where if you don't know what Power Auras is, Power Auras is basically like what Weak Auras is today. It's just that Power Auras was basically just like a less customizable version of Weak Auras, because it was really just a debuff and buff tracker. Because nobody thought to, just generate the massive beast as weak auras today, which I honestly think that weak auras might be pushing the boundaries of what an add-on should and shouldn't be able to do. Because there's actually a weak aura that you can use that will generate a button that you click, and it will do the entire dragon daily for the Sons of Hudir. The one where you go up and punch the dragon and just hit him with the spear, and you just spam click that one button, and it does everything for you, which those add-ons got removed in vanilla. They actually broke the API that those add-ons used back in the day. So why can we use this now? The main reason why I stuck to Classic for so long was just because this is basically where all my friends are playing right now. Retail, for the most part, like the past few years, if you've noticed like what everybody else has said, is that the game's just been kind of just on a downslope right now, and it's just one of those things where it's just like you kind of wonder at times where it's just like what they wanted to do with the game, you know? And it's just honestly, it's just kind of just almost killed the game at one point. And like coming back to retail, the one thing that I found that I really enjoy with Classic is that I can get a character up to level cap, I can get him gear, and then I can honestly say that I'm done with the character. Like, the only time I ever have to log into the character is, to just sit there and join a raid or a group because you just want to play the character that day. And that's really how it is. But the main reason why I'm playing Classic is because my friends just wanted to play Classic. And like I said, this is the best time for me to, like, actually get back to, like, show to myself that I've actually improved at actually playing the game, because like I said earlier, I've never killed the Lich King. My characters on retails to this day still don't have the Kingslayer title. I mean, it's the Kingslayer title, come on. You can just go in there, you can smack Arthas one time and you win. For the most part, I really enjoy the content where it's just like I actually get to play the game. I know it sounds so weird, but you can only do mission tables for so long. And you can only like do world quests and dailies by yourself for so long. And ultimately this is a game where it's just like you need to play with people. So like the dungeons, the raids, I'll go through them. The biggest problem with like the dungeons lately is that I did not like Mythic Plus. It's not that Mythic Plus is a bad system. It's a great system. The problem is that the almost mandatory feel that you've had to go through Mythic Plus. There was no option other than Mythic Plus, and it's just like I just left at that point. And that's actually the first time where I quit the game was back in Legion when they came out with that Mythic Plus system. And it was fun at first, and you get your character freshly geared up. It's still fun for a little bit. But when you realize just like you spent forever, your character's got like good enough gear to go into the raid, and they still won't take you into the raid because your gear sucks, and your only option is to go back into Mythic Plus. What do you do? But honestly, the biggest joy is when you've got your group of friends, no matter how big it is these days, like 10, 25, 40. I've been through and coordinated 120-man raids before, just for the Alliance raids, which, those are awesome, and absolute chaos in a voice chat. I don't recommend that. But it's really just like any form of group content that I enjoy doing. I can do PvP. I'm not the greatest at it because I just don't partake in it very often. But of course, this is a PvP server, so it's just like I will defend myself in the world if I have to. And honestly, I can tell you how many Frost Mages find out that Protection Warriors have not only 2 silences, but they also have 3 different charges too. And it's great when you see them blink away after you do the first charge. They reach you, they blink away, and then you use your human trinket and you charge them again, and then you just watch them just like give up on the world. Lighted, I'm protection, so I don't really kill them very fast. The biggest change in the game has been all of the... It's almost kind of gotten to the point where it's just like you can play the game and you can literally never say a single word to another player. And in like at least this version of the game, that's still technically possible, but it's so much harder. The overall lack of communication that came into the game has been probably the worst part. Because the best part of the game is actually, it's not the game itself. The game, World of Warcraft has never actually been a very good solo player game, and it's still not, even to this day. Because you need the other players, especially like in this version, where it's just like, you can't really make enough gold to do anything at the high level without the auction house. And in order to have the auction house, you have to have other players on your server. Otherwise, you're grinding everything yourself the hard way. And I'll be honest with you, on a PvP server, grinding those titanium ore, that gets pretty daunting. Especially on a server with like this one, where it's just like, this is a locked server. There are bots here. And after a while, you just get sick and tired of all the bots in Sholazar Basin. But it's really just like the absence of, you know, the world chat. On this server, there is a chat room called World that people occasionally talk in. And it's just a great way to like get a community. Like, you quickly find out who like your good players are, you find out who your bad players are, and then you find out relatively quickly who the ninjas are, the loot ninjas. You find out who the hunters are, because, you know, hunters be hunters and roll neat on everything. But yeah, and then you find out who your good players are too. And I don't put myself in like the position of a great player. I actually think that I'm mediocre at best. That's why I make World of Warcraft add-ons and not go and parse. This guy, his gear is actually not great, but I have a Warlock main because, you know, Guild needed a Warlock, so I play a Warlock. This is the character that has my heart. But, you know, I don't really push to parse at all, so I just don't care to do it. But, you know, I know other people that do, and I want to support them in doing what they want to do. Because, you know, I recognize at this point, it's just like, I'm not going to have any fun in the game by myself. And it's just disappointing where they almost got you to that point where it's just like, it was a single player RPG. And I mean, the questing on retail, like that level up questing, that the first time through, not bad. Every time afterwards, it gets progressively worse. But the very first time through that content, it's actually pretty good. The worst part is when you're going to content the first time and you find out that everybody's like 6 months ahead of you, but that's another problem. Which, you know, they've already fixed that because they removed artifact power from the game. And as far as I know, there's really no big power system in Dragonflight. Realistically, the only thing that I've heard about Dragonflight, and I'm saying this purely from a context of a guy that's never actually looked at Dragonflight, the only thing I've heard about Dragonflight is dragonflying, where all I hear is, dragonflying is fun, and I'm like, well, I'm glad that there's at least something fun about the expansion. So, if I was to take a system out of Classic, it would be a community-driven system, which is immediately going to push a button somewhere, and I know this, but I hate hard reserves. I hate soft reserves. We just need to get that out of here. Why are you requesting a soft reserve in a 10-man raid when you're playing the only class that can use that item to begin with? That just makes no sense in my head. Honestly, main spec, off spec, disenchant. That's the only loot system that I prefer to use. That's the only loot system I will ever use. It just frustrates me where people are just asking for this. Stuff like gear score and item level, that's going to exist no matter what you do, because at least it gives you a sense of an idea as to, is the character geared properly for the content that they're doing? I mean, obviously there are flaws to that system. I much prefer that system compared to hard reserves, where it's just like, you will never be able to get a Surge Needle Ring in a pug. Not on this server. Everybody hard reserves that. Good luck getting that, because your only way to get that is to buy it off the auction house for 10,000 gold, or run the raid yourself. As for a feature I would take from retail and put in Classic, give me transmog. Like, it was my first opportunity in original Classic to get a Sulfuris. I have a Sulfuris for this character. It sits in his guild bank. I still want to wield a Sulfuris. Can I please transmog Sulfuris onto a weapon? And, not actually have to equip Sulfuris, because obviously Sulfuris is not a very good weapon these days. But, I honestly think that my character looks pretty decent for like the gear that he has, where it's just like a mismatch. But as soon as I start getting like raid gear for this guy, he's just gonna look terrible, because the raid gear set for a warrior, I mean, the tier set looks good, but you're also equipping gear that doesn't match it at the same time. But it does make PvP a little bit easier, because you can tell if the character's actually wearing PvP gear, so you know if you can hit him hard or not. Honestly, overall though, I want transmog. Like, if I had transmog, you would see this guy in a set of golden gear that I have dubbed the golden cannonball, because when you equip a gnome in that same gear set, he literally looks like a cannonball when he charges. Not the banana suit. It's just like a gold. It's a set of vanilla gear where it's like a smooth golden gear. I have the gear set list on like Wowhead or something. I'll send you like a screenshot of it. But they like you equip it on a gnome, it actually looks kind of hilarious. Because on a gnome or a dwarf, the shoulder pads are so large that if you equip the smallest possible smooth helmet, it's just almost a round curve. Almost. He would wear something like that, I just don't like the spikes. I guess we can go back to add-ons, because, that's really what I got you invested in talking to me here about. You asked me, like, if there's something that add-ons can do in the game, and actually I'm just going to say no. I want more restrictions on add-ons, because I think they're just a little bit too prevalent. I mean, you can see that they're doing this in retail, where they're like actually making the user interface better, and they're taking a bit of a wild approach, where it's just like you can tell that like their implementation on like the edit mode is a little half-baked, and that's actually a good thing. Honestly, just give Blizzard the feedback on it. Go like, hey, I like this feature. Can we make it better? Can we improve it? Because add-ons have a problem, and that is CurseForge. And CurseForge is the backend website that add-ons use to get their add-ons posted on Curse or Overwolf. I'm sure that if you're watching this YouTube channel, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That little application that you can use to install add-ons. Well, you can manually install the add-ons. You can download the zip file, unpack it into your World of Warcraft folder. There are also other websites. The one that you see a lot of my stuff posted onto is WoWinterface.com. That's where the majority of my stuff has wound up going onto. But you can also pick up add-ons from other sources too. I don't recommend ever picking up an add-on off of WoW Matrix due to legal issues, because the WoW Matrix does not respect licenses, and just grab add-ons and install them. But realistically, developing some of these applications, like the one that we're using for this stream here, Narcissist, that's a lot of work. And CurseForge has a rewards program that pays next to nothing for an add-on author. They kind of like have this incentive program where it's just like the more downloads an author gets, the more rewards that they would get from CurseForge. And it's never been anything particularly interesting. And it's not like I'm out here and I'm telling you to go out and donate and pay money to somebody. Even a simple thank you every now and then, just post a comment in there, go like, hey, thank you. Or, you run into an issue because you get that wonderful message where it says an add-on has prevented this interface action from occurring. Report that. Because we can make all these things better, because obviously Blizzard's not wanting to. The biggest problem with the Blizzard interface is that it's actually kind of terrible. I said that before, but it's not only visually terrible, it's mechanically terrible too. I mean, the right-click menus that you get on things literally break themselves as soon as you look at the code, and if you have an add-on that at least tickles it, you cause UI taint. UI taint is basically that thing where it's just like you install a brand new add-on, and then this add-on that you've had forever suddenly starts getting blamed for causing issues. Going like, hey, I mentioned LUI earlier, where it's just like you open up the auction house and you posted an auction using Trade Skill Master or Auctionator or something like that. And next thing you know, you get the pop-up message from LUI saying that LUI is preventing the interface from doing an action. That's actually not LUI's fault. That's the gosh darn Blizzard interface's issue. And honestly, I understand that like programming is a little bit more complicated than what I'm making it sound like it is in some cases, and it's also not nearly as difficult either. The biggest problem is that like a lot of these World of Warcraft add-ons, you might see a couple usernames, but realistically, the majority of add-ons is actually a one-person project. Like the most popular one that's going around right now, that WeakOr's team has only one actual full-time developer. Everybody else is just a contributor. And they make all their money from the Wago website, wago.io, where you get all your WeakOra import strings from. That's where they make their money from. It's just like running advertisements on that website, which, you know, running ads on a website is kind of terrible these days because, you know, just about everybody that visits your website is going to have an ad blocker enabled to some extent. Can you consider turning that off, please, by the way? Please. Webmasters need to make their money too. But, you know, like, let's see. There's an add-on that allows you to skin all the buttons in the game. It's called Map. It was created by this person whose username is like StormFX. StormFX has been around for years, developing this add-on and add-ons before it. It used to actually not just be called Mask. It used to be called like Button Mask, and then it was called something else at first. I can't remember all the names that this thing had. But putting in an add-on like that to, you know, just change like the look of button is actually a lot more work than what you would actually realize. And most oftentimes that add-on's code has been forked and used in interface replacements like LUI and TuckUI. There's code from there that's been used with no actual credits given due, which I don't know what license Mask is under. It could be all rights reserved, GPL, or MIT, or whatever. But that's a pretty big deal for me. It's like, hey, if you're gonna use my stuff, at least let me know and just like give people like my name. Maybe I made something else that was pretty cool, you know? That's just my thought though. But back on the topic of CurseForge. CurseForge is a horrible website. It's sluggish, it's inefficient. The only reason why they made a client is because everybody hated the website, and now that their client's bad too. You know, like, I'm a big fan of the WoW add-on manager these days, and I've been using that. And they had like their API access for Curse turned off, and that could almost single-handedly kill a project because that's how prevalent Curse is for, you know, getting your World of Warcraft add-ons. And it's really just like, that's a problem. If you can, find an official source for your add-on that is not on Curse, and just use that. Because oftentimes you'll find that if you can get an add-on fresh off of like their GitHub link, that add-on's going to get more updates faster. In the case of Deadly Boss mods and bigwigs, the world first guilds that actually use those add-ons, they will actually have the add-on author personally email like the zip files for that add-on to them before they even commit it to the Git repo, which I thought was actually pretty interesting when I found that out. But, you know, try to find the official source, because CurseForge basically pays nothing. A job that pays nothing for this game that you want to use that thing for because you feel like you can't play the game without it. And, you know, the game costs $15 a month, right? Every now and then, just like, go like buy like the guy that's still developing Carbonite, go buy him like a Pepsi or something, you know, just a cup of coffee. It's like $2 or sometimes $3. I don't know where you live. I make my own pots of coffee at home. It costs me like 20 cents. Thanks, Stephen Graham.